Let us come to God in prayer. Good and gracious God, again, we give thanks for this day, for you gathering us here in your loving and caring embrace. We ask that you take the hot coals off of your altar and touch these lips of clay, so that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your O God, in your sight. O God, our salvation, our Redeemer, and the one who brings us love. Amen. During my seminary years, our courses included Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, theology, sort of a general course on theology. I remember reading Joseph Ratzinger before he was Benedict the 16th. There was systematic theology and, of course, Reformed theology. We learned church history from the beginnings forward, and, of course, American history, which I am taking a deep dive into my doctorate at this point. We learned some pastoral care, preaching and worship, and, of course, some Christian education. It was at the end of one such Christian ed course that we were asked to evaluate. We were asked to evaluate all our courses. Very fine, lovely, thank you. But this time we were asked, what did we like that we learned? And of all the readings that we read, what did we like best that we read? After all these years, I don't quite remember all the details of the course syllabus or the specifics of my evaluation. But what I do remember is that to a person, we thought that a book that was written by Jim Palmer called To Know as One is Known, To Know as We Are Known, as being the best book that we read that semester, if not all year. Well, I can't give you the specifics of the book after all these years. I remember that the book was very enlightening in the way that it connected our being with something that is larger than ourselves. Call that something larger than ourselves God, if you must. But even God is larger than we think. And that something that is larger than ourselves, though not confined to this body, was very inclusive and is very much active within each of our lives. We call this journey that we call life. We just simply need to tap into it somehow. Jim Palmer would eventually leave the Christian ministry and start something that he called the Center for the Non-Religious but Spiritual. So if anybody's interested, Jim Palmer's an excellent author. I was reminded this week of Jim Palmer when one of his posts came across my Facebook feed, as I am one of Jim's almost 5,000 friends, Facebook friends. In his post, Palmer reminds us when the Buddha received enlightenment while sitting under the Bodhi tree. I looked it up. A Bodhi tree is a large fig tree. The Latin is Ficus religiosa. This particular Bodhi tree is located in the area of Bihar, India. And the Buddha sat under this particular ficus fig tree seeking enlightenment. It is a large, large tree. At a particular moment, 49 days after Buddha sat down under this large tree in the year 500 BCE, the Buddha received enlightenment that he was seeking. And the enlightenment is this: what you need is already in here. You already have what you need. It's already there. Nothing needs to change to know peace and serenity and freedom. You just need to tap into it. In other words, says Palmer, There is nothing wrong with the way things truly are at its most real and fundamental level, and therefore there is nothing truly, factually, objectively preventing peace, serenity, and freedom. There is nothing keeping us from what we are seeking. Furthermore, Buddha saw that the people are that people, us, society, culture, our systems, are the cause of our own inner suffering and psychic pain, which ultimately results in the hurt that we inflict upon each other. As my dad used to say, we are our own your worst enemy. My dad also, he said, sometimes we need to get out of our own way. I also need to add that sometimes we are the cause of suffering. I cause suffering. Other times we are on the receiving end. We are on the hurting end of that suffering. Call it, be truthful, name it. That's where we enter into our healing place. Buddha came to this conclusion during the time of Jeremiah's ministry, when Jerusalem was under siege by the Babylonians a half a world away. Buddha's enlightenment reminded me of last week's lessons and sermon, when the writer of Genesis and Paul came to the same enlightened conclusion as the Buddha. And those are also my links for this week. That we are created and born and good, and we are born good, and we are born very good. We enter into the world whole and complete, and we are created in the image of the Most High, the Imago Dei. As human beings, we are born whole and complete, and within each of us, we already have what we need. And what we need is already within us. And what we seek is already here. If we only stop for a moment and find it. Here. It's not out there. It's here. Buddha's profound insight was that all is well and is whole at its most fundamental level, and that his underlying nature and essence was one with that wholeness. My nature, my essence, is one with that which is whole, and so is yours. Well, we already have within each of us a wholeness that leads us to peace and serenity and freedom. There is something keeping us from experiencing our God-given wholeness and dignity. And what is that? And at this point, I began picturing Jesus and Buddha sitting under this giant fig tree of enlightenment, having a conversation with one another. As Jesus bites into a fig freshly fallen from a tree, he nods in agreement with Buddha. And Buddha says, you know, I have a great feeling of empathy and compassion for all who are suffering in this world. And Jesus responded, I get where you're coming from. Remember my Sermon on the Mount where I bless the poor and the needy and the suffering? And when I admonish my followers toward the end of my life, that what we do to the least of these, we do to me, especially the poor, the hungry, and the naked, and all who suffer. And don't forget my passion, as I suffered on the cross with all those who do suffer. Buddha nods in agreement. Well done, he says. The enlightenment ones are the ones who choose to continue living compassionate lives in order to aid the liberation of others, says Buddha. Jesus hands the Buddha a fig, and Buddha bites into it. Jesus and the Buddha began to contemplate the reason for human suffering, our own personal suffering, the suffering of others, and the suffering of society as a whole. And the Buddha said, I think there is suffering in the world because we hang on to our stuff. We hang on to our possessions that don't bring us the happiness that we are seeking. We hang on to things, and we hang on to systems, and we hang on to worn out old ideas that were passed down from our parents that don't work for us anymore. We are created complete and whole, and then our family systems just mess us up. Jesus said, like, totally, Buddha. Remember when I said that we store things in our barns where rust and moth destroy? We need to let go of our stuff. We need to let go of our burdens, work through our childhood traumas and our post-traumatic stress disorders as adults. The Buddha chimed in, exactly. It's like when I taught that we can find deep joy and peace in this life if we were only aware of our own intuition and our own innate understanding of the way things really are at the deepest level. You know, much of the ministry and suffering of the world, said Buddha, is the result of ignorance of the way things really are. Rather than tapping into the deep peace and joy of the fundamental reality of all things, which is never disturbed or never threatened, we instead attempt to achieve our happiness, well-being, and peace through our worldly attachments. We fight and claw to attain and hold on to that, which by its very nature is not permanent and fades away, always changing. So that which we are seeking happiness is always changing, and it is always, the goalposts are always moving. Jesus nodded in agreement with the Buddha and said, indeed, it's like when I was comparing the leadership of my time to children calling one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed for you, and you did not mourn. Buddha picked up another fig and mentioned how good the figs are from this tree. And then he asked Jesus exactly, what are you talking about there, Jesus? Jesus said that his culture at the time wanted John to dance, but John would not. It was the way he experienced or practiced his faith. He was perfectly fine not dancing to the tune of the power structure. They said that John was too stern and too serious. And then Jesus says, then they expected me to be serious and a teetotaler, just like John. Neither one of us would follow the script or toe the line. Our wholeness, our divinity, our spirituality was, as you say, innate and within us. We had to let go of what doesn't work. We need to let go of those things that cause suffering. Then Jesus says, both John and I claimed our own divinity and chose to share it with the world. If only people would let go of their stuff and grasp what is good, what is holy, and what is sacred. Jesus said, all I want for people is to share the same relationship that I have with God. It's theirs. It's right there if they only let go and accept the divine embrace that is already within them. As Jesus finished, he bit into the fig he'd been holding. And the Buddha said, to find this inner peace, you must first and foremost learn to have patience and compassion upon yourself, and to take your struggle as a part of your own path of growth. Learn to let go of what you don't need and tap into the peace and serenity that is already there. And Jesus says, you know, back in my day, there were 613 laws that a person had to follow to be a good Jew. I remember when a group of Pharisees approached me asking what I thought the number one law was. I narrowed the law down to 2. Love your God with all your heart and with all your body and with all your mind. And the second is like it. Love other people the same way that you love yourself. That means take care of others the way you take care of yourself. That means give other people some wiggle room. And while you're at it, give yourself some wiggle room. In a culture that demands so much from our dysfunctional family systems, from systematic oppression of culture and the politics of the day, from the heaviness of life itself. There is a better way. Come to me, said Jesus, all of you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens. I will give you rest. Take my yoke, not that yoke, my yoke. Don't take that yoke and then expect me to do something. Take my yoke and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest. You will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. And Buddha said, you must walk this journey now yourself. You must say with Jesus, I am the truth, because Jesus is the truth, and Jesus is in you. And Jesus said, yes, it is like when the Buddha said, whoever sees me sees the teaching. Jesus and Buddha then turn to you and say, do you understand that what you seek is already within you? The path is within you. The path is you. You must walk your path. You must be that path. Praise be to Jesus and Buddha and all that is sacred and all that is holy. Amen.